Ko tangata tiriti, toku iwi, ko Olivia, toku ingoa. I'm Olivia, I'm a climate change reporter at Stuff. I have met the Minister before and spoken with him about transport, and I get the feeling that he is really passionate about this. When he speaks about transport, he's echoing a lot of the ideas that I hear in green transport circles. So, he's not kind of trying to hedge, I think, two communities. There's a huge number of people out there for whom car dominance makes a lot of sense, and yet he's kind of talking about car dominance, which I think is an idea that isn't very mainstream yet. So I think he's really passionate about changing transport for the better, and I get that, just in the things that he's speaking about. But I notice, I'm not sure if he's taken that message to the wider public yet. If he is standing up there and saying things like car dominance and sharing road spaces better with the public, that is a huge idea that we're going to have to get across. And I feel like we're not communicating that really well. So when we put, say, for example, the Waka Kotahi's Innovating Streets programs in, we are trying to, we put these things in and it slows down car traffic and people get mad, and it just kind of comes across as this kind of us versus them and what's going on. And I feel like we need to communicate the message much more that slower, safer streets are saving lives and cutting carbon, and we need to get that message into the general public, those people for whom they walk half an hour a week and they drive everywhere else. But yeah, that was my first impression.
Great, thanks, Olivia. Celia, do you want to introduce yourself and give your first impression, please?
Kia ora e hoa ma, ko Celia Wade-Brown toko ingoa. I was the founder of Living Streets together with Andy back in 2002, Living Streets Aotearoa, and it's great to see the advocacy continuing. I think there are a couple of things to take some heart from the Minister's speech. One is that he likes our advocacy, and to actually say that is helpful for engaging in the future. The other one was his understanding of urban form and how he talked about city centres as destinations, was against urban sprawl, and really seemed to understand the relationship between what you build where, that it's not just the infrastructure that's allocated to transport that makes a difference. What I find slightly frustrating, and he didn't do it every time, was the lumping of walking and cycling together because they need different things. To be fair, he did mention walking on its own slightly more often than walking and cycling. But if you're talking about a third of those journeys less than 2K, 2K is usually considered the walking maximum for a commute or a walk to the shops. I was also a little disappointed that he didn't mention the Waka Kotahi survey that just came out, I think came out in April or May, and it mentioned that in the last year, and it may well be to do with COVID, that there was an increase from 60% of people to 68% of people who walk regularly. That's a very significant increase, and it would have been nice to have had it mentioned. And the cycling was static at 12 or 13%. Now, as you would well know, I'm a very keen cyclist, so I'm not in any way saying against cycling. I'm just saying if we're going to design city centres for walking, we have to think about walking. And the only investment examples he gave were both shared paths. And back in that same survey, and I'm looking forward to Aotearoa, part of the Great Harbour Way. It'll be absolutely fantastic. And I like having I prefer separated, but when it's between city and city, like Lower Hutt and Wellington, then that seems fine. But in general, we don't want shared paths, and that survey absolutely backs up those of us that say pedestrians don't feel comfortable on shared paths. If you have a look at it, the majority of people are saying those the pedestrians find them unfriendly and unsafe. The cyclists are happier with them, probably because it's so awful on the roads. So, it's a challenging issue. I was slightly disappointed that he talked about, despite understanding that every journey includes walking. If you park your company car in the car park, you've probably still got to walk to the front door of the office. I think that less than half an hour statistic, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that's for journeys that are only walking, whereas many journeys are a combination, particularly public transport. And I may have missed it, just hearing it a couple of times, that video. It didn't mention public transport once, and that's a critical component for people to walk more in the towns and cities. I think it's good that we distinguish between the needs for urban and rural. We risk looking unrealistic if we tend to talk about all journeys. If we focus on our towns and cities, that will be the most helpful. So overall, very positive framework. Good about city centres as destinations, not to go through, but we'll need more advocacy and education on the specifics of walking. Thank you.
Thanks, Celia. I'm not sure that Bevan's made it onto here yet, so maybe this is called a discussant panel. I've never even heard of one before until we decided we were going to do it. So this is a whole nother level of innovation for us as well. I'd like to pick up on the walking measurement at some point, but I was just thinking, do you think that what the minister said, one of the themes of our summit is how will we meet our 25% walk mode share increase for climate action? Do you think, Olivia, that you're hearing the sort of things that are going to move us to quite a transformational change there?
Not really. I think when I've talked to experts before, they said that putting a target out there is the first thing that's needed, and a deadline. So if we do go with 25% by the state, that will that will be the first step. And to be honest, I am actually quite, when I heard, I think Waka Kotahi themselves were disappointed with the Climate Change Commission's recommendations. I think that Waka Kotahi itself thinks we could go bigger. So that will be interesting. And of course, there's nothing stopping the government from actually going, we want to do even more than the Climate Change Commission has put down, though that would be politically interesting. But I know the minister has rebalanced the budget, but it's hard to be spent, or it can get spent on really massive projects. But yeah, I haven't seen lots yet, and I'm a bit nervous that some of the action on the ground, the innovating streets thing, which I think is a big driver, is getting really bogged down with opposition. And if there's too much negativeness early, that things might, agencies might back off and put it in the too hard basket. So I think getting that right, getting innovating streets right, and communicating that early on so that we can have some success, and also to communicate the success, because of course, unfortunately, the people, the small projects where the community gets angry tends to be the ones that hit the headline, and the ones that are happening, say in Timaru, that are going really well and everybody loves, that message doesn't get out there so much.
What was the one in Timaru, Olivia?
Oh no, sorry, I think there might be one in Timaru, but yeah, that was just a random one that I'm not quite sure.
Right.
I have to say that it's difficult for reporters sometimes to report on the ones that go through smoothly, and there's nothing like a grumpy resident with their arms folded to get into the news, whether they're in Auckland or Wellington or wherever. I think the urban form thing is probably the most important long term, but it certainly won't get us to our targets of 25% of journeys being walked in the short term. And I was actually involved with, I've just posted the Turning the Tide link, which is where the 25% target came from. And I was pleased to see the Climate Change Commission pick that up. So there are some much more immediate things that could be done, like ensuring that Ministry of Education has a much stronger mandate for helping children walk to school. And again, whether it's in the walking school buses when they're really young, or whether it's more independently as they get older. I remember when we started a walking school bus at Island Bay, my son, who I think was probably 8 or 9 9 at the time, said, "Mum, it's a really good idea, but please don't make me walk with you." So there is a level of independence they like. That urban form will take 10, 15, 20 years to have an effect. Slower speeds, more support for walking school buses, easier ways of putting in crossings, and the legal change that we've been lobbying for of giving pedestrians priority, not just across driveways, but across intersections, would make a big difference. And lots of education and campaigns. Because we are ubiquitous and universal, we're invisible. And we would like to see a lot more. Even in that survey, all of the pictures, I think all of the pictures, 73% of people walk regularly, but almost all the pictures had more cyclists than walkers in them. And that's just something that once you're sensitized to it, you see it. But we need to have more diversity. There weren't many plump people, there weren't many older people, they're all young, slim, American looking people in the pictures. And that doesn't actually make it feel that we're all included. Where are the women in the hijabs? Where are the men in the jandals with tattoos? And now let's be a bit more inclusive in our imagery.
Quite a picture tells 1,000 words, doesn't it? So even though we might not consciously think about what we're looking at, it's giving us a lot of information. So I was quite interested to hear you speaking about funding and spending as well, Olivia. So I think that's probably one of the things that will come through during our summit, is how much is actually getting spent on walking, for instance, compared to all the rest of the transport spend, or even the health spend, or even the planning spend, because it covers a whole lot of ground there. And we're also going to have James Rennick, one of the climate change commissioners, tomorrow, who will hopefully explain a bit about how the final report is emerged, because that 25% walk mode share seems to have, I'm not sure, faded into the background a bit. But I just wanted to know, thinking about funding of walking in particular, what's your view on what needs to change there, maybe?
I mean, this is an incredibly tough question. From the people who I've spoken to, I've just put out we've just put out our Forever Project magazine, and I did a piece almost on this question: why does it take so long? In which I spoke to you, Ellen. And one of the ideas was that if the government's handing over money and the budgets are open, you almost need both the council and the local community all lined up in order to get something spent. And it almost seems in each community, either the council isn't quite on board and so it blocks there, or the community isn't quite on board and so it blocks there. And that's a really hard thing to do. And I suppose, I'm stealing a lot of people's ideas here, so I can't really claim. Like Holly Walker was the one who said, we need to connect our carbon goals to promote walking with our desire to cut the road toll. Like, we can achieve both things by doing these, green transport ideas and promoting walking. So that's where that came from, and I totally think that's a great idea. and I've now lost where I was going. But yeah, I think that we have to, the communication of it, because I'm someone who obviously is in the media, I think that is so important to get the community level stuff. I think you've got to be changing hearts and minds early. Otherwise you can get a path built, but if the community hates it, that next project won't get built and the project after that won't get built. So I noticed that when the feebate happened, it hit the news and people started talking about the damage that driving does. There was, a lot of demonization of utes and legitimate utes and things like that, but it did open an opportunity for people to talk about. So if we got people at that point where people are interested and their minds are open and going, we might go, look, this is, if we have an opinion piece or someone's coming to us and said, hey, I want to write about how great walking is, why taking the kid, walking the kids to school as opposed to driving them in the ute is good for them and good for our environment. So if you guys notice something like that around transport where it's blowing up and in people's minds, that's a great time to say, hey, I'll talk about this. Let's talk about this, even if it seems a bit